Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Good morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means in the ReliefFactor.com studio that the Hillsdale Dialogue is back, the last radio hour of the week. And as promised last week, Dr. Larry Arnn has come back 2 in a row. We will return to the Republic by Plato next week with Professor O'Toole and perhaps Dr. Arnn. But this week we promised... I know you want to come back with him just to make sure he's not making mistake after mistake. But I remind everyone... The Republic of Plato, go get it, the second edition by Alan Bloom. We're using this edition. It's available in paperback, and we'll be back going through and finishing book 1. Dr. Arnn, last week when we talked, I reminded people that you and I have been friends since 1989. George Duke Majan was the governor of California when the late Tom Fuentes introduced us. Pete Wilson, our friend who is listening this morning, as he listens every Friday, was the governor from 1991 to 1999 when we became really good friends. And California was a different place then. Kamala Harris did not get a public job until 2006. How would you describe to people who cannot remember California in the glory days when you were learning from Dr. Jaffa at the Claremont Graduate School and we were... How would you describe California then and what it is now? Because every time I talk to Pete Wilson about it, the governor's size is what had happened to the state that we loved for so long.
Well, you know, I was an immigrant to California. I went there in 1974 to go to graduate school, and it looked like paradise to me. I wished it were greener. I'm from Arkansas, which is very green, but it was bright and clean and sunny and vibrant.
And
of
safe.
Course, the countryside.
It was safe.
Yeah, safe. It was, it was lovely. And by the time I left in 2000 to move to Hillsdale, Michigan, it had become unsafe and much of it dirty. And that's, bad government, right? Bad government is a curse when it comes. And Pete Wilson fought against that, and George Duke Majan, too. I am privileged to this day to know Pete Wilson and admire him very much. And he was an early one to sound the alarm about this illegal immigration. Many of the people who think that Donald Trump is an extremist on the right were critical of him back then because we'll lose the Hispanic vote, whereas Donald Trump gets every bit as much of the Hispanic vote as any Republican ever got. And probably going to get more this time. So anyway, the point was, the immigration has something to do with the decline of California, and it's hard in the bureaucratic age. It's hard for families because so much is provided by the government and so much is taxed away by the government, and it's in the there's no.
We got to talk about what you just said is very important, and I want to pause on that. Pete Wilson was the first border hawk, right? 1994. First border hawk. Said we cannot have people coming here who will not pull the wagon but will sit in the wagon. He used to say there were 7 people pulling the wagon and 3 in the back being pulled. Now it's reversed. That was in 1991. Pete did a very bad thing to me. He put me on the Air Quality Management District Board for a year till the Democrats threw me off. And I don't know if I've forgiven him for that yet, but I met the fetching Mrs. Hewitt at a fundraiser for Pete Wilson, so I've forgiven him, I guess, because he's responsible for my wonderful life. But Pete Wilson fought against the bureaucratic state, and he fought against an insecure border. He was right ahead of his time. What happened after his governorship? How could it go so badly so quickly?
Well, part of it is we've met the enemy and he is us. But it's the scientific management of a democratic people has been taken to a higher state of perfection than ever. And the question, the American experiment is put so beautifully by the founders and later by Lincoln and by many in American history. The question whether a people can govern themselves. And against these mighty things, just remember, we just crossed $35 trillion in debt. More than half, Brian Westbury, who's much more cautious about statistics than I and better at them, says that almost exactly half the economy is controlled by the government. I see numbers that say more than that. And so that means that the independence of the people is eroded. But the independence of the people is actually the object of the government and of life by one set of standards. We have a new set now. And the new set is we're going to engineer the society into something different. That's something unnamed until we're far down the road toward re-engineering, because we don't really quite know what it'll be. It will reveal itself to us. And that's the way now, see. And Pete Wilson stood against that, and George Dumajan stood against that, and Ronald Reagan stood against that. And it's worse now than it has been. But also, the rebellion is more pronounced than it has been. We're in the middle of a great fight. Donald Trump said, fight, fight, fight. So that's where we are, I think. And
Dr. Arnn, I've got to tell people that California's public schools, when my children were young, were terrific. They really were. They got a great education. They knew civics. They did it well. The Common Core came in after they were too old to injure with it. California schools are terrible now. And my grandchildren just moved. They're military kids, so they just got moved by the military from one coast to the other. I'm enormously relieved. The higher education system of California was once the jewel of the United States higher education system. It's a mess. It's a disaster. The Claremont colleges were great. They are now a mess. They're a disaster. It just is inexplicable to me that the Democrats nominated as their nominee the epitome of California. Are you surprised by that?
No, it's, that's the power elite, right? That's who runs that outfit. And they have more money than God, many of them. And I don't think she does, by the way. But the people who decided it would be she, whoever those people are, by the way, how did they get Joe Biden out? I don't know to this minute how they did.
Nobody does.
I just always believed that they would and they could. And they did. And because it seems to work like that, right?
The New York Post has reported that Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi pulled the ticket on Joe Biden, but that in revenge, he endorsed Kamala Harris because they didn't want her. I don't know if the New York Post is correct. We won't know until the memoirs come out. And I would not, however, be surprised if that story is correct.
Well, I have the sense that Barack Obama is very powerful. And, he's the golden boy. He got his 8 years. Didn't he do great for America? And I've always believed that, I have a blind spot, I guess, but I've never been impressed with Joe Biden. Not when he was a senator, not, I've never thought he was tough. I've never thought he was common, like an ordinary Joe, which he likes to call himself. I've never thought any of that was plausible. So I never saw the strength of him. Obama, I feared him the first time I ever laid eyes on him. I just went, wow.
First time I ever laid eyes on him, Dwayne and I were in the convention hall at the Fleet Center in 2004 when he blew the roof off the top of it. And the ability to orate is an underappreciated. he is an orator. He's very good. I'm not sure what he believes still to this day. I think he's a man of the hard left. But boy, can he talk. And that's quite a formidable combination for the left. I don't think Kamala Harris can talk that way, do you?
The jury's out about that. I confess, first of all, I haven't listened to her all that much, but because I can hardly bear it. But I'll bet that she's formidable myself. I don't.
All right, we will see. The convention in 10 days will tell all. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to come back and ask Dr. Arnn about the French Revolution again, because what we saw at the Olympics, and then go back to Kamala Harris. Stay tuned.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding, and we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. All things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu. All of our former Hillsdale Dialogues, which I've been doing with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, or his designated representatives for 10 years now. They're all collected at hugh4hillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, about 2 months ago, I asked you, what was the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution? I had no idea that the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics would make that so evident, but did you watch that? I mean, did you see what the French presented as their representation of their country, and what was that?
Well, it's decay. That's what it is. We have advanced decay in Western societies, and it takes on official attributes now. First of all, France doesn't have a government right now.
Correct.
And the reason it doesn't is that Marine Le Pen was the surging phenomenon. And this is happening in many Western countries now. It happened in Britain. The centrist parties, the ones that style themselves that, when a party on the right advances, they have to decide what to do. And in France, the centrist party, Macron's party, sided with the left. And although both Nigel Farage in Britain in the British election, where the Conservatives were wiped out, and Marine Le Pen in France, they got a very high number of votes per seat actually won. And the winning parties got a very low number of votes per seat actually won. I think in the case of Farage in Britain, his was 800,000 votes for each of the 5 seats he won, whereas the Labour Party was 30,000 per seat, and they got a third of the vote, and they got 60% of the seats. That's, in other words, and you can't complain about the Labour Party. It's a party of the left. What became of the Conservative Party? The oldest political party, the most successful political party in history, it claims, all the time. And it's probably true. And so how can that happen? And the answer is, I think there's decay in high places. And my view is that's Mr. Starmer, who's the prime minister. I hear that they understand. I know a couple of people in British politics and watch the news too, and I hear that they understand that they got to grow because they're broke and they're heavily in debt, just like us. And so he's going to try to adopt some pro-growth policies, while he does at the same time a bunch of crazy stuff. And but how the Olympics, that's awesome, awful. And the Last Supper, why would they do that? The answer is it's outrageous.
Dr. Arnn, I made the argument that France has fallen. They're afraid of their own people, and they're afraid of the migrant surge that has come in the last 10 years. And so they did the one thing they could do to try and signal that they're with the Islamists, which is to assault Christianity, because France has fallen. And I don't know how far it can fall. I don't think it's hit bottom yet.
Well, I had a visit by Minister Jacques, the culture minister of Hungary. He invited himself. I liked him. He's a good guy. And in the course of his remarks, these are serious people too, by the way. They have a simple proposition. If your birth rate falls below replacement, then there will still be people living in the place where you live now, eventually. It just won't be your people, So he's worried about the Hungarian birth rate, and they're working hard to get it up, and they've made some significant progress by making it more advantageous to have kids. Right now, having kids is not a good proposition. Anyway, he said this thing. He said 3.5 million people have come to Europe from Western Europe okay, I got to finish this point when I get back.
Hold on. We'll come back to it. I want to hear the whole anecdote uninterrupted. The Hillsdale Dialogue will continue after these messages. Please stay tuned and head over to hillsdale.edu to sign up for Imprimis and their free video courses. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Stay with us. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. Dr. Arnn is back from vacation, and he's back working with us. We began with Kamala Harris, and now we're talking about a visit of Hungary culture minister to the Hillsdale campus. And I interrupted Dr. Arnn, which I'm loath to do because I usually will edit around it, but I want to hear the whole anecdote, told like the whole anecdote. Reminds me, by the way, Dr. Arnn, our mutual friend Ken Kachigian has a new memoir out called Behind Closed Doors. Oh, yeah. He said he used to hate to tell President Reagan that he was wrong, that one of his anecdotes was wrong, because the former president didn't like to be corrected. So I don't like to interrupt you, but sometimes you got to do it. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
When did the minister of Hungary come to the Hillsdale campus?
Last term in February, I think, they came, and he talked mostly about the birth rate in the Western countries and how we need to get it up, and they're doing things to do it. But then he said this thing in response to a question. He said that 3.5 million immigrants have come from radical Muslim countries into Western Europe in the last 5 years, and that if 10% of them are radicals themselves, they outnumber the military forces of Western Europe.
Wow.
350,000 is more soldiers than France and Britain and Germany and Spain and all of them have. And meanwhile, they're running deficits and going broke. And they do not, thinking they're going to conquer Russia in a war with Ukraine, and they don't have any soldiers. And then they put drag queens for the Last Supper as part of the Olympics. That's sad.
Boy, it is the low point, I hope, of the Olympics. It turned out to be, but the reaction was a non-apology apology, and the director, a man named Jolly, inappropriately named Jolly, said he didn't mean anything by that. He meant to bring people together. How could one not know what that was, Dr. Arnn? I mean, do you find that risible or plausible?
Well, that's the way now, right? It's cynical. Many sophisticated... First of all, it's a cynical thing to say, right? For him to say that, I didn't mean anything by it. Really?
Right.
What is he, stupid? And that's just, this will be over tomorrow, right? And it's not taking seriously the question he has lampooned the Last Supper in a high ceremony of international importance, right? That's what he did. He didn't mean anything, right? And that's just that means either he's entirely cut off from the world as it exists, right? Because the implications of God are everywhere. Everybody is interested in God if they think for a minute, and most do. And this account of God and these actions of God are the most prevalent in the world even today, right? And it's an old story and a beautiful story and a tragic story. And so we're going to have our games and we're going to make fun of that right now. That's, and then we're going to say we didn't mean anything by it. So that's just cynicism.
Now, I don't know whether the Democrats will avoid the mistakes of the French Olympic Committee, but I want to call attention to what happened before the Last Supper. It's at this moment I jumped up and turned off the television because I had my 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, and 12-year-old grandkids with me. Dad's deployed, mom is moving, so they're with us. And so I thought we could watch the Olympics, the opening ceremony, because it's usually just athletes marching into a stadium, and they're from all over the world, and it's a celebration. Instead, we got a beheaded Marie Antoinette in 100 different windows. At that point, I said, I can't. How am I going to explain this? What do you think that was supposed to? What message was that Marie Antoinette beheaded would be a motif for the Olympic opening ceremony?
Yeah, and there is, a self-hatred in the radical left, in the philosophy of the radical left. Nietzsche, diagnosing it, said that it was a wish for death. So there's some of that, right? The Last Supper represents a sacrifice made by God himself so that we can have life, right? That's the claim, right? And so instead, let's slander that with drag queens. And that's, as I say, that's deeply cynical, nihilistic, hateful. And then to issue a non-apology apology, of course he couldn't do anymore. That thing cannot have been unintended.
I agree.
That's what that was.
But now we're coming up. On Monday, the Democrats meet in convention in Chicago. We don't know, and you suggested last week they'll probably carry it off without a great deal of trouble. And I think the left will realize they can't reproduce Chicago 1968 without disaster. But do you think they will successfully hide the agenda? Because Kamala Harris is a San Francisco Democrat, and San Francisco Democrats have done to California what they want to do to the United States, which is ruin a once glorious city and a once wonderful state. They've ruined it. And do you think the Democrats will put that on display, what their intentions are, or will they hide it?
Well, they will. They have the luxury of doing both, right? Because first of all, the media will cover, they won't cover everything that happens. They will cover the things that present them in the best light. And they'll be good judges of that too. So most people will get their news from places that make the convention look sane. Now, not very many people probably, I don't know how many people watched Trump's speech or J.D. Vance's speech at the Republican convention, but probably not very many people will watch Kamala Harris's speech. We'll see.
I know the numbers on Trump. 28 million, of whom 45% watched via the Fox News channel. That's why I know it. I was on after his speech, and the numbers were astonishing for cable news. But even then, it's not much. It's nothing like the opening audience for the Olympics. The left got the Olympics. Yeah. The conservative movement in the United States got one network gathering in almost all the voters who are up for grabs. There's a disparity in what happens, what people see and what they don't see.
Yeah. So I don't, what social media, it's, Joe Biden was elected president of the United States from his basement, right? And the media connived at that, right? And that is cynical. And so we've got that cynicism in our country, too.
And we have a cynical media that is hiding Vice President Harris's record. We're not allowed to remind people that she was the border czar. We get fact check on that. They're not very good at stopping serious people from discussing her failures, but they are very good at changing the subject. And I think Kamala Harris is capable of giving one speech. We'll find out on Thursday next. Do you think she is?
Probably. First of all, she's bound to be smart, and she is certainly tough and very aggressive. And, she did, here's a strong thing she did. It's notorious. She's against the death penalty. And so a guy killed, Isaac Espinoza was the name of the policeman, with an AK-47, and she refused to seek the death penalty. And Dianne Feinstein and Barack Obama both appealed to her to seek the death penalty, and she would not do it. Now that's strong, right? That's don't mistake that for weakness. This is a tough woman. The fund for the people who rioted in 2020.
Oh, in Minnesota, yes.
She gave money for that to defend those people who've been rioting all summer. That's
indicative, and we will come back and talk about what it is indicative of. Stay tuned, America. We'll be right back with Dr. Arnn on the Hillsdale Dialogue.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is the president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale, hillsdale.edu. Dr. Arnn, the first decision Kamala Harris made as nominee Harris was to skip Prime Minister Netanyahu's address to the joint session of Congress. She is president of the Senate. She instead chose to go to meet with a sorority. What did you make of that decision? What ought viewers to conclude and voters to conclude of that decision?
Well, they're in a bind in a way. There's a substantial number of Muslim voters in Michigan, and Michigan's in play. And so the old alliance with Israel which the Democratic Party has been part of and benefited from too, because most Jews vote Democrat. That seems to be breaking, and they need Michigan and Pennsylvania, and so do the Republicans, right? And so the Republicans are not going to get that vote, but maybe the Dems are. then there's what is behind this radical leftist, including feminist, friendship for Hamas, for God's sake. That's insane, right? I mean,
LGBTQ for Gaza is really quite a remarkable joining of that which cannot be joined.
Yeah, basically illiterate, right? And
yes.
And yet it's a radical. I mean, like these kids at because this last spring, elite colleges were unable to function. They couldn't have their basic function. They couldn't go to class. Couldn't guarantee the safety of the students. I saw pictures at USC that some students set up a barricade and they were wearing Arab headdress and they were checking IDs and they wouldn't let other students pass and go to class. And they were looking for Jews. And so that's happening in the West, right? And that's crazy. And it's crazy for one reason, because if you're an Arab and you want to live in a country where you can vote freely and you can write what you want to in the paper and you can engage in peaceful demonstration, you need to live in Israel. That's the country where you can do that, right? And you can't do that in Gaza, and you can't do that in the West Bank. So they're, you know, the Jews are killing everybody. It's just amazing.
But you know, what's interesting, Dr. Arnn, you just said that as a joke. What they're doing to J.D. Vance, if you were running for president, they would take that out and they would run that as an ad. And I'm not sure the American electorate can understand the difference between a joke that has been taken out of context and slapped into a television ad. Do you still believe that the American electorate can discern what the candidates are about?
I do. Yeah, I do. First of all, I think we would be, I personally fear and find formidable the machinations of the ruling class of America. They're powerful. And, the college where I work is very powerful, very successful, right? It's not compared to them. And, the ordinary prudential thing for me to do would be to make my peace with them somehow. And nobody at Hillsdale College wants to do that because we have these old principles and we want to stick to them. And we believe they're beautiful and true. And we believe our predecessors died for them. Shouldn't we try to prepare ourselves to do that if we have to? We try. Anyway, the situation is very serious. But one could not regard it as serious if he thought that the people were unworthy to rule themselves. But they are not. By and large, they see what's going on. And I just pray that, now is a good occasion for them to get control of all this and start the process of getting control of all of this. And I asked
President Trump the last time he was on if he was consciously borrowing from Richard Nixon's Great Silent Majority speech, and he said yes, he was. And you're saying it's up to the Great Silent Majority to actually stand up and be counted, and especially in your state of Michigan. My state of Ohio is fine, just fine. It's up to Michigan, to Hillsdale. So everyone go to hillsdale.edu. Go get Imprimus. Make sure you visit the campus. Make sure your kids go there. I told my granddaughter last week she had to go to Hillsdale. I had to explain to her why. I wanted her to be educated. Thank you, Dr. Arnn.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.